Hello, and welcome back to the Gardner Show.
The Gardner Show! The Gardner Show, 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 the Gardner Show.
I'm your host, M. Gardner. I'm a novelist, a lifelong lover of stories, and if you're new here, welcome. Pull up a chair. You might want to stay a while. Today is episode 1, and I wanted to start this show off the way I think every story should start. At the very beginning. Not my beginning, not your beginning. The beginning. 50,000 years ago. Give or take. Before books. Before writing, before language even had a name to call itself, human beings sat around fires and told stories. Nobody told them to, nobody assigned it, nobody built podcast studios for them. They just did it naturally, instinctively, like breathing. And here's the question that has haunted me for all of my adult life. It's the question that is the reason why this show literally exists. Why? Why do we tell stories? Why have we never stopped? And what does that say about who we are? So, pull up a chair, and let's begin at the very beginning. Since our ancestors came down from the trees somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 years ago, if you believe in that sort of thing, we have been telling stories. Back then, people didn't have the luxury of written languages. No books, no tablets, no phones to scroll on. So when somebody started talking, you listened. There wasn't really a whole lot else going on anyway. Who knows what those first stories about? Maybe they were about a mammoth who, almost sat on someone. Maybe it was about a giant fish that was, this big. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe it was the beginning of a myth. Anthropologists and evolutionary biologists have a few theories, and I want to walk you through them, because I think when you line them up, something remarkable starts to emerge. The first and most practical function of storytelling was information transfer. Before society, before literacy, before institutions, stories were how knowledge survived. Hey, you probably shouldn't go into that cave. Guess what? That plant will kill you. Did you know Ugg, the strange man from the other tribe? He shouldn't be trusted. Or even, hey little Johnny, here's everything you need to know about hunting mammoths without getting stomped to death. Cognitive scientist and author Brian Boyd argues in On the Origins of Stories that storytelling evolved because it sharpened our society's intelligences. It let us practice scenarios, simulate danger, and share experience without having to personally survive every mistake. Stories were quite literally life and death. Maybe Billy bit his brother, and the tribe made examples of it. And everyone knows the rule, not because they read it in a rule book, but because they heard the story of Billy. The second thing storytelling does for us is answer the question, who are we? Think about it. Every story we tell today, every family has stories, every nation has stories, every religion is built in at least part on stories. Even among friends, the thing we do when we get comfortable with someone is share stories. Joseph Campbell, the mythologist and the author of A Hero of a Thousand Faces, which is a great read if you haven't read it. Very boring, but very good. Spent his life studying the stories of humanity and what they told across cultures, across centuries, and across continents. And what he found was that we keep telling the same stories. The hero who leaves home, faces trials, transformed, and returns changed. That pattern, the monomyth, the hero's journey, shows up in Greek epic poetry, in Native American legends, in Hindu scripture, and in modern blockbusters. We use stories to answer fundamental questions: who we are, where did we come from, and what are we doing here, and where are we going? That's identity. That's story doing its deepest work. The third function of story is meaning making. And this is the one that honestly gets me, you guys. Facts tell us what happened, whereas story tells us why it mattered. There's a reason most people can tell you more about Harry Potter than they can about the periodic table of elements. It's not because Hogwarts is more important than the chemistry. It's because story is the native language of the human brain. Psychologist Jerome Bronner, in his landmark work, Actual Mind, Possible Worlds, distinguished between two modes of human thought: the logical scientific mode and the narrative mode. And his argument was that narrative is how the brain makes meaning. We don't organize our memories as data, we organize them as stories. We don't process our identity as spreadsheets, we understand ourselves as characters in a story. We are, to our core, narrative creatures. Here's the thing that really stops me cold when I think about it. Across time, across cultures, humanity repeatedly invents many of the same stories. We all have heroes, we all have monsters, we all have flood myths, a great cleansing water that resets the world. We all have tricksters, we all have gods who made something from nothing, and we all have tales of good versus evil, death and resurrection, the underdog who rises. Anthropologist Clifford Geist, I've probably slaughtered that name, and if you're listening, doubtful, I really apologize. But Clifford Geist called stories webs of significance that humanity begins to spin around themselves. We live and we argue suspended in these webs. I would add that we've been spinning the same webs since the beginning. That tells us something profound about human nature. It tells us that these stories aren't arbitrary. They're not random entertainment. They're speaking to something deep and consistent inside of all of us. Something that was there 50,000 years ago and is still here today. And if you're a person of faith, as I am, I feel that that is more than coincidence. There is a story being told in the very fabric of who we are and what we are. And it's one of the oldest, and it's much older than any of us. Campfire stories become tradition. Traditions become molded into myths. Myths become epic, and then parables, then novels, and novels become films. Films become games, and games become virtual worlds where you are the story. The medium changes, but the core never did. We are all still sitting around that first campfire. That campfire just happens to be something different. It's a screen rather than sticks and flame. And maybe that's why you're here. Maybe you're a writer trying to understand what you're doing when you sit down to write. Maybe you're a reader who feels something deep when the story lands just right. Maybe you're someone who loves to get lost in a good book or a good show, and you've never quite understood why that hits the way it does. It hits you because it's ancient. Because it's you. Alright, Writer's Corner. This is the part of the show where I pull back the curtain on whatever I'm working on, whatever I'm wrestling with, and whatever I'm thinking about this week. Here's where I'm at right now. I just finished my 6th novel, the first draft. And without giving it too much away, it's a fantasy story, but at its heart, it's a story about identity and belonging. 2 themes we've talked about today. Actually, that kind of tells me we're probably on the right track. The question I'm wrestling with is one that comes up in every book I've written. Who is this main character before the story starts? Because here's the thing. Characters don't just arrive on a page as a blank slate. They arrive with history, with wounds, with habits, with beliefs shaped by things that happened before chapter 1. And as a writer, if you don't know those things, if you don't know what your character was doing the day before the story begins, you will feel it. The character will feel thin, their choices won't make sense. So, this week I'm sitting down and writing a scene that will never appear in the book, just so I know who I'm writing about. Challenge for you. If you are a writer, pick your main character or even a side character if you need to. Write a scene from their life 5 years before your story starts. Don't plan it, just do it. Discover them. See who you find. You might be surprised. Here's the quote I want to leave with you today. It's from Ursula K. Le Guin, one of the greatest speculative fiction writers who have ever lived. And the quote is this: "There have been great societies that did not use the will, but there have been no societies that did not tell stories." Think about that. The will, one of humanity's greatest technological leaps. It's optional, but storytelling is not. My challenge for you this week is simple. Pay attention to the stories around you, the ones your coworkers told at lunch, the one your grandmother told growing up, the news framing that you accept without question, the story you tell yourself about who you are. Stories are everywhere, and now that you know what they're doing, you'll start to see them differently. Thanks for pulling up a chair around my campfire. Keep questioning, keep telling stories, and keep creating. And I'll see you next time on the Gardner Show. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the Gardner Show, please email me at m.gardnerbooks@gmail.com.